One of the things my therapist said to me, and so it doesn't happen every single week, but that's something we definitely try to prioritize. And this one is kind of a holding up a big old mirror to my own sinfulness. It's not pretty. And that's nothing that he ever put on me. That's an expectation that I put on myself. And so a lot of the things that people say can be just like these major stressors or major life events. We've experienced a lot of them within just one short year. And that's really one of his big purposes in marriage as well. Hello and welcome back to my channel. As you're watching this video, we are 2 days away from Tyler and my 1-year wedding anniversary. You can see some of our photos back there behind me. But we got married on November 13th of 2021. And part of me kind of can't believe that I'm already making this video, a 1-year recap, because it feels like it was just yesterday. But then the other part of me feels like it's been much longer, just because I feel like we've experienced so much life together in the course of 1 year, which I'm gonna get more into in this video. But I thought it would be fun to celebrate by reflecting on some of the things I've learned in our first year of marriage and sharing them. And there's literally so much that could be said. I feel like it's so hard to just think through all the things you've been learning over the course of the year. And I'm sure even as I'm reviewing this and posting it, I'll think of other things I could have included. But I'm gonna be sharing the top 7 things that came to mind as I was prepping this video at least, and then also what my favorite thing about marriage has been so far. And to get in the mood, I thought I'd throw on a white dress because, you know, wedding. Unfortunately, I'm still not wearing my wedding ring because pregnancy fingers are still not allowing it to fit. But hopefully in a couple weeks here, when baby is born, the swelling will go down and we can put that ring back on. But if you have questions about this dress, it's from Nothing Fits But. I've loved their pregnancy dresses. I have this one and one other, and they're just the best. So I'll have that linked down below if you want to check it out. But anywho, let's go ahead and get into the video. My hope is that whether you're single, dating, engaged, married, that these can be an encouragement to you. And so let's just get into them. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. That is such a huge way that you can support my channel. And then also give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful or encouraging. So here we go. The first thing is that it is different for everyone and their story isn't yours. Something I feel like I heard a lot as we were leading up to the wedding, that I'm sure you've probably heard a lot, that is just said a lot, is that the first year of marriage is really, really hard. And while it definitely is for some people, it's not for everyone, because everybody's relationship, everybody's story is different, in the same way that how people meet is different or how relationships progress is different. The same is true for the first year of marriage, is that it's just different for everyone. And I want to share a perspective that I thought was just really interesting and really helpful from my own story. So if you watched my video on how I knew my husband was the one, you know that it wasn't an immediate thing for me. That knowing wasn't immediate, but rather as I got to know Tyler more and more on a deeper level, the knowing came through that process. And one of the things my therapist said to me, which by the way, I always have linked down below, BetterHelp, which is a service that helps connect you with a Christian counselor, and you can get 10% off with my code Kaci10. Just wanted to mention that. It's always linked down below. But anyways, back to the story. As I was then at that point where I was sure and Tyler and I were progressing toward marriage, is she said that, you know, because you didn't have that instant infatuation and just kind of getting swept up in the relationship in the beginning, she said, I feel like you spent a lot of time asking some more of those tough questions, having some more of those hard conversations, and truly getting to know each other and unpacking things on a deeper level, so that when you then did get to the point of being sure, having done all that sort of hard work on the front end, gave way to falling in love and experiencing the infatuation or sort of the emotions that come with that. And she was saying a lot of times you see relationships when people kind of have in the beginning that instant knowing or infatuation and do get swept up, it can sometimes cause some of those deeper, harder, tougher conversations to be missed. And she was saying a lot of times that's when I'll see, you know, that first year of marriage maybe being harder because you're kind of swept up in the emotion of it in the beginning, and then as the relationship kind of steadies out, some of those things come up and need to be worked through. And she was saying like neither is better or worse or good or bad, it's just different, you know? Some people kind of go through it on the front end and some people on the back. And And that was something she said to me again as we were kind of like approaching our wedding. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wonder how that will play out. And honestly, I feel like in a lot of ways it's true. And so that's just kind of the first thing I've learned, is that everybody is different. And that's not to say that we haven't had any hard things in our first year or things to work through still. And I'm not naive at all to think that we won't have hard things ahead, because marriage is always going to involve that. But whether your first year is super hard or super easy, or whatever your story or progression looked like, know that everybody's is different, and that is okay. Number 2 is to find ways to intentionally connect. I think when you're married and you're spending all this time around each other, it can be easy to sort of miss the intentionality in that time. And I've found that it is so, so important. And so find those things for each of you that allow you to feel deeply connected to the other person, and prioritize those things. For Tyler, he is a quality time guy and a physical touch guy, and that's what allows him to feel really connected to me. Whereas for me, I want to be asked those good questions and have those deep heart conversations. And for me, physical touch is also a big thing. And so we've had to learn to intentionally show each other love, or do those things, or initiate those things that is going to make the other person feel connected. And then kind of those are like sort of his love languages and mine. But we've also found that there are certain things together that we both really enjoy that make both of us feel really connected to each other. And so one that I've shared before, and it's something we try to do weekly, and that is setting aside time to intentionally pray together. So we do try to pray together, at meals and as we're sort of like falling asleep at night. But once a week, we try to set aside time when we have a little journal where we basically write out different categories in our lives of like community, work, family, baby, all the different things, and we write out specific requests for each of those categories and for people in our lives. And then we spend time praying together and going back and forth, just lifting up those different requests. And I feel like something we always say coming away from that time is, man, I love praying with you. And I feel like for both of us, it just makes us feel so, so connected. And so it doesn't happen every single week, but that's something we definitely try to prioritize. Another thing are date nights. This is something we've really tried to prioritize. Usually it's Tuesday nights for us, and sometimes that looks like going on a date. More recently, it's looked like cooking dinner together and watching our birth course together and asking each other questions about it, but setting aside that intentional time to connect. And then another thing that we've both found makes us feel really connected to each other is hosting. I feel like there's something about sort of the teamwork aspect of that, where maybe I'm in the kitchen working on one part of the meal or getting something prepped, and he's making another part of the meal, or we're tag teaming to get whatever cleaning done we need to do, or just then inviting people into our home. And I don't know, there's something about hosting together that really just makes us feel like a team. And I feel like we always come away from those times like, man, babe, I love hosting with you. I love just getting to do and share life with you. And then another big one for us is ministry. There's been a couple times throughout the year that we've spoken together, or even when we like work on a YouTube video together and spend time thinking through it, or like doing worship nights together, whatever the case may be. But being involved in ministry together is something that makes us feel really connected. And so anyhow, that's the thing I've learned, is just to find the things that really truly make you feel connected and to do those things. Number 3 is communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate. I feel like that's the cliche thing that's said in any sort of marriage advice, but it's so important. But specifically within that very broad category of communication, there are specific things that I have really learned in this past year. So I have a little list. I'm gonna work through them. The first is to have trusted confidants. So when you're going through something or working through something, have trusted people who you're going to talk to about it and inviting to speak into it, rather than just kind of like willy-nilly talking to people about it. And specifically with those trusted confidants, make sure they're people who are for you as a couple, for your unity and for your marriage, not just you as individuals, rather than having people who are going to be like, man, I can't believe he said that, or I can't believe she did did that. You want people who are for the two of you together. And so we have certain couple friends who will talk to you about different things, and just different friends that we know are those trusted voices. We've talked about Buzz and Tara before. They're a couple friend who are also a little bit older than us, and so they're sort of those mentor figures, and they're people that we've really trusted with a lot of things and to speak into our relationship. And we know that their voices are in line with God, meaning they're seeking Him and they're ultimately for us as a married couple. And so that's so important. And also in the vein of how you talk to other people about things going on in your relationship is to never speak poorly of the other person to others. I feel like this is something we've really guarded from the very beginning of our relationship, and it is so powerful to speak highly of the other person and to protect them in the words that you speak, even if maybe you're going through something or working through something, to just really be on guard against that. The next one, the thing that I've learned under communication, is that different words mean different things to different people. And kind of a funny example of this that I feel like probably we realized even before marriage is the word sure. So when I will say like, hey babe, do you want to go do something? And Tyler's like, sure. To me, I kind of associate that word with being like, yeah, we could, we couldn't, like not super excited about it. Whereas for him, it means like, sure, yeah, let's do that. That sounds great. And so there were a couple times where like things like that would come up and I'd be like, sure, does that mean you don't actually want to do it? You're not really sure or what? And he's like, no, it means sure, like, yeah, let's do it. Whereas to me, I associate a different meaning with that. And so there's just been little different things like that that we've had to learn, like, oh, this means this to you, whereas this means this to me. And that's sort of like a meeting in the middle thing where, you know, we have to learn like, okay, like I can't expect the other person to communicate in the way that I communicate, but on the same vein, knowing that whatever phrase means this to each other, I can try to communicate in a way that's going to help them understand based off of how they interpret it. And so that's the second thing under communication. The next thing is to say what you mean. And this one is kind of a holding up a big old mirror to my own sinfulness and just stuff that I've learned about my own tendencies in communication in marriage. And so basically I think I've realized that there's times where maybe if I'm feeling hurt by something or upset about something, I will kind of withdraw a little bit, but not because I actually want to withdraw. It's because I want Tyler to press in and ask those questions and to feel pursued by him in those ways. And something I realized in realizing I do that too is that that is hurtful to him. And it's kind of me having to lay down my pride by actually just like coming to him and humbly saying like, hey, here's how I'm feeling, rather than expecting him to know or to guess or whatever. And it's also realizing that that behavior, that kind of like pulling away because I want him to press in, is manipulative. And so I feel like that's something I learned pretty quickly on in our marriage, is one, my tendency to do that, and kind of like working through, why do I do that and where does that come from, and communicating to him that, hey, this is my tendency, and when I'm pulling away, like I'm not actually wanting to pull away, it's because I actually want to feel more connected. But that's not the way to go about doing it. And so that's something that I've learned about myself, is to say what I actually mean, not to manipulate, essentially, because it's not pretty. The next thing is timing, still under communication, under that whole bracket. But I've realized for me, when there's something on my mind, whether it's like a silly small thing like, oh, I want to tell you about this thing or whatever, I just had this random thought pop into my head, or something on my mind in terms of something I want to talk through. For me, I want to talk through it immediately, and it's on my mind and I just want to have the conversation. And for Tyler, I feel like he's more than willing to do that, but sometimes I realize that like it's popping into my mind, but he might be like really immersed in doing something else or in working or doing some other project, and I'm totally just catching him off guard because I've had this whole train of thought, but he wasn't thinking about that. And so for me, just having to learn like the, what's the word, discernment of timing with certain conversations, especially if it's something more along the lines of like something I want to talk through, to, you know, not bring that up as we're in the car heading to go hang out with people or whatever. And just learning like to fight that urge or that seeming need I feel in me to like, this is on my mind, so I want to talk about it right now, but to realize like the conversation could actually go better if the timing is good. And so that's something that I've learned. And sometimes this might mean going to bed mad, or going to bed like having not worked through something. I wouldn't say like angry. But that's just something that we've kind of had to realize too, is there sometimes you're working through something and you're trying to have a conversation, but you're both really, really tired. And for me, I'll just want to keep having the conversation. And there's been times that Tyler has said, like, I want to talk through this with you, but we're both not thinking straight. And in the morning, like, we're gonna be able to have, this is gonna be such an easier conversation if we have a full night of sleep. And usually, like, whenever that's happened, the next morning it's like, oh, that really wasn't even a big deal. Or maybe it was something we still need to talk through, but you know, like, we're so much more level-headed in doing that now. And so timing is huge in communication. Next is to have the honest, hard conversations. And so whatever that may look like, just realizing that growth comes from these. And like I was talking about even in the beginning, in that process of dating Tyler, I feel like asking those hard questions, having those conversations, each time we had one of those, that's actually, I feel like, what was a huge part of the process of me knowing that he was the one I wanted to marry, because in those conversations we got to connect so much more deeply and we got to know each other so much more deeply. And so don't shy away from the hard conversations, because I think that they ultimately often lead to the deeper connection and intimacy that we are all longing for. Next is a simple one, but be quick to say sorry. And the final one under communications is to do your best to identify what expectations you have that are at play, whether they're realized expectations or not realized, and to communicate those, because just makes everything better. Number 4 is to seek to outserve the other person. So completely do away with the mentality that keeps tally or says, well, you did this, and so, you know, I did this and we need to keep score or whatever. There's just no room for that in marriage. And honestly, that's something that I feel like surprised me about marriage, is how much that already naturally just wasn't the mindset. Meaning, I feel like it surprised me how much we both naturally just find joy in serving the other person. But of course, there's days where that takes more intentionality and that's not your default, but it's so worth it to do. The Bible says that it is more blessed to give than to receive. And so I feel like when you're just focused on trying to serve the other person, it creates this really beautiful cycle effect. And there's truly a lot of joy in that. But then the other side of this, which is kind of weird to say, is to also let yourself be served. I said this before in a video where I talked about how going into marriage, I feel like I put this expectation on myself to want to be able to do all the house things myself and to have all the different things done when Tyler gets home from work. And that's nothing that he ever put on me. That's an expectation that I put on myself, kind of not even realizing it, because I wanted to be able to do all those things. But I quickly realized that, like, it's just not possible, that we're both working, and even though I'm working at home, I need to be able to share the load. And so I think at first I almost felt this weird guilt for letting him help, even though he wanted to help with all of those things. And I realized that that also requires a humility to allow him to be helped, or to allow yourself to be served in whatever way it might look like. But it's also a huge necessary part of marriage, and there's such a sweetness in it. And so try to outserve the other person, but also allow yourself to be served by them, because that's just a part of the beauty of marriage. Number 5 is that prayer is powerful, and that it is so important to be diligent in praying for your spouse, and to remember that God is the one who changes hearts. And so whether it's a heart change that needs to happen in your spouse or in you yourself, either way, that's going to be taken care of through prayer, that God, it changes our hearts through that process. And it's such a powerful, beautiful thing to think about, just lifting Tyler up in terms of his walk with God, in terms of protection, in terms of his calling and ministry, in terms of him being a husband and stepping into the role of dad. Like, there's truly no other thing that we could do for another person that is more powerful. And so why would we not want to do that for the person literally closest to us, who we're walking hand in hand in this life with? And I know for me personally, one of the things that makes me feel most loved is knowing somebody else is praying for me. And so what a beautiful gift to give to my spouse, and just a powerful thing to do. Number 6 is that intimacy is something you learn and you grow in. So I made a whole video talking about the truth about sex and kind of the perspective of us both having waited and then experienced that after getting married. And there's something so special about kind of figuring it out together in the beginning, and it's beautiful from the start, but it only continues to get more and more beautiful and continues to grow and just be something that you grow at. And so that's something I've learned. Number 7 is that God works all things for good. We know that and hear that, and that's something I've talked a lot about on my channel just in general. It comes from Romans 8:28, that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. And a big part of that good, if we look at the context of that passage, means conforming us into the likeness of his son. And so God works all things for good, and the same is true in marriage. His heart is for, as you and your spouse, is for your unity and for your ultimate good. And so as I was talking about before, how I feel like the first year of marriage really hasn't been hard for us, that it's had like an ease to it in a lot of ways. That's true, I would say, relationally, but in terms of things that we've experienced, we've had quite a lot that we've experienced this year. The first sort of like month and a half, or yeah, I guess almost 2 months of our marriage, we were traveling a lot to visit a bunch of different family in different places for the holidays. And then basically right after coming back from that, we experienced a very early miscarriage, which we did make a video sharing the story about that. And that was right before then finding out that we are pregnant with the little baby I'm carrying now. And so just these big life events. And then of course, moving recently, a couple months ago, making this big move away from community and just all the different changes and things that went along with that. And so a lot of the things that people say can be just like these major stressors or major life events, we've experienced a lot of them within just one short year, which is why I said in some ways it feels like it's been longer than a year. But in all those things, I see how God has used those things and is continuing to use those things that we're even still navigating now to draw us closer together in unity and to just deepen our relationship and to make us dependent on him and ultimately to make us look more like him. And so there's just been a lot of beauty that's come from even some of the difficult things we've had to navigate that has produced a sweetness, a deep, rich sweetness in our relationship. And so that's one of the things I've learned, is that God works all things for good. And that's really one of his big purposes in marriage as well, is to use it to make both parties involved, to make both individuals look more and more like him through it. And so I've definitely seen his hand in that, in the good, in the bad, in all of it. And it's truly a beautiful, special, special thing. Finally, my favorite thing about marriage, honestly, it's the simple, everyday life type things. It's when, we make a meal together, whether that's breakfast or dinner, and then we're side by side cleaning up the dishes as a team. It's, when we're sitting on the couch together doing our quiet times and he tells me like, babe, I want to tell you this cool thing I learned, or when I say the same thing, and just getting to connect in those ways and hear what God is teaching him. And yeah, all of that kind of stuff. It's dreaming about the future together, and it's knowing that like whatever God does in our life, wherever he takes us, that we're going to get to experience that together. And it's just literally having your built-in best friend to experience all the parts of life with, to navigate and to just do it as a team, is really, really special and sweet. And yeah, I would have to say that's probably my favorite part of marriage so far. So that is all I have for this video. I would love to hear from you if you're married. What is something that you have learned or are learning in marriage? And then if you are not married, I would love to hear what is something that was maybe most helpful to you from this video that I shared, or something that was maybe most surprising to you. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. As always, I hope that you enjoyed this video or found it helpful or encouraging. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.